Life doesn't really begin at birth. It begins at awakening. And for many, that awakening arrives around 40. Not because the number has magic, but because you finally do. 40 is when the fog lifts. When you stop performing. When the world's expectations lose their grip. When the self you've built begins to crumble. So the self you were always meant to be can finally breathe. Carl Jung once said, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning." You feel this, don't you? The slow, quiet shift. The inner recalibration. The growing refusal to carry what drains you. At 40, you don't chase meaning. You demand it. You no longer want a life that simply looks good on the outside. You want one that feels true on the inside. This is the age where illusions break. Where the masks you once needed begin to suffocate you. Where the roles you played, the pleaser, the fixer, the overachiever, start to feel like old clothes that never fit your soul. And suddenly, you begin asking different questions. Not, do they like me? But, do I like the life I'm living? Not, what should I be doing? But, what is my spirit actually craving? This is the psychological shift, the quiet rebellion, the inner revolution. You stop trying to control how the world sees you, and start mastering how you respond to the world. Because by 40 you've lived enough life to notice patterns. You know when someone is manipulating your empathy. You see the red flags before they wave. You sense the emotional energy behind people's words. You recognize projection, insecurity, and control, not as mysteries, but as predictable human behavior. You don't take things personally anymore. How could you? You finally learned that most people aren't reacting to you. They're reacting to their own wounds. And so you rise. Not louder, but wiser. Not harder, but clearer. You become less reactive, less impulsive, less desperate for validation. You begin to master the pause. The sacred moment between stimulus and response. Where emotional self-mastery is born, you start to realize that peace is not a place you find. It is a boundary you build. A discipline, a decision, a line in the sand that whispers, "This is who I am now, and this is who I refuse to be ever again." Around 40, something else happens. A deeper honesty emerges. A rawness. A stripping away of what you pretended to want. You start admitting truths you once hid from yourself. Maybe the career you built was never truly yours. Maybe the relationship you fought for was fueled by fear, not love. Maybe the dreams you chased belonged to your younger wounds, not your mature wisdom. This is the age where the soul begins demanding authenticity, where you stop living life on autopilot and start living from intention. Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." At 40, you finally begin to understand that sentence. Not as poetry, not as philosophy, but as a spiritual assignment, because life before 40 is practice. Life after 40 is truth. You've tasted loss. You've met disappointment. You've survived people you thought you couldn't live without. You've faced yourself in moments you didn't think you'd endure. And somehow, you're still here. You're stronger. You're softer. You're more awake. Life begins at 40 not because time has passed, but because awareness has settled. Because your inner world is no longer a stranger to you. Because you finally see with clarity, and not through the lens of who you were afraid to be. 40 is the age where you stop bargaining with your soul. You no longer trade your peace for approval. You no longer shrink yourself to keep the room comfortable. You no longer ignore the quiet voice inside you, the one that's been whispering the truth for years. Because now, you hear it clearly. You feel it deeply. You respect it fully. You begin to understand that the first half of your life was shaped by survival, but the second half, it can only be shaped by consciousness. In your 20s, you worked to prove yourself. In your 30s, you tried to keep everything from falling apart. But at 40, you choose what's worth holding on to. You choose where your energy goes. You choose whose presence is allowed near your spirit. This is emotional adulthood, the shift from reaction to intention. The shift from chasing life to creating it. You start noticing something else too. Your tolerance changes. You tolerate less chaos, less disrespect, less emotional confusion. less obligation disguised as love. Not because you're cold, but because you finally learned the cost of ignoring yourself. Boundaries are no longer walls you build out of fear. They are doors you close out of wisdom, and you close them quietly, without apology, without guilt, without explanation. Because the awakened soul doesn't announce its growth. It simply moves differently. You find yourself gravitating toward slowness, toward depth, toward presence, toward truth. You crave conversations that nourish your mind, connections that honor your spirit, experiences that bring you back to yourself. The noise of the world becomes unbearable. The chaos of superficial living, exhausting. The games people play, transparent and uninteresting. You begin to crave simplicity, peace, honesty,
clarity.
Energy that meets you where you truly are. You stop running. You stop pleasing. You stop proving. Instead, you start choosing with precision, with self-respect, with a kind of maturity that only comes from weathering life's storms. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And by 40, your thoughts are no longer tinted by insecurity. They're shaped by experience, by mistakes that became lessons, by endings that became beginnings, by pain that ultimately became power. You've learned to sit with yourself, to face the shadows you once ran from, to listen to the parts of your life that still ache, not to escape them, but to understand them. This is the psychological integration Jung spoke of, the merging of who you were, with who you are, into who you are meant to become. At 40, you begin returning to yourself, slowly, gracefully, intentionally. You become more aware of your inner landscape, your emotions, your triggers, your wounds, your patterns. You start catching yourself in the act. When you're people-pleasing, when you're abandoning yourself, when you're slipping into old habits. You pause, you breathe, you choose differently. This is emotional mastery, not perfection, not control, but awareness. Awareness that liberates you, awareness that rewrites your life, awareness that turns 40 into a rebirth. Because the truth is, the awakened soul doesn't age. It evolves. And this evolution becomes undeniable at 40. There is a moment in every awakened life when you realize you are no longer living from the outside in, but from the inside out. That moment often arrives around 40. You begin to understand something profound, that your inner world is not a reaction to life. It creates your life, and suddenly you become far more careful with what you allow to move inside you, the emotions you carry, the stories you tell yourself, the people you give access to, the environments you choose to stay in, the boundaries you enforce or neglect. At 40, you finally see the architecture of your own mind, the scaffolding built from childhood, the cracks formed by disappointment, the walls you raised for protection, the doors you left open for anyone to walk through, and you begin repairing it, not out of shame, but out of respect for the person you are becoming. This is the age where self-awareness becomes your compass. Not pressure.
Not fear.
Not the ever-changing desires of others, but your own inner truth. You start asking yourself deeper questions. Why do I react this way? Where did this fear begin? Is this belief mine, or something I inherited? Am I living from trauma or from choice? Most people don't ask these questions, but awakened souls do, especially at 40, when life's noise finally quiets enough for you to hear your own truth. You stop blaming others. You stop outsourcing your happiness. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you from your own patterns. You begin taking radical responsibility for your energy, and with responsibility comes power. The power to change your inner narrative. The power to break generational patterns. The power to create boundaries your younger self could never hold. The power to regulate your emotions, rather than spill them everywhere. This is the birth of a different kind of strength. A quiet strength. A mature strength. A strength that doesn't flaunt itself, but radiates from within. By 40, you've seen enough of life to understand something essential. What you don't change, you repeat. And so you finally begin the real work. The inner work. The shadow work. The gentle excavation of your fears, your desires, your truth. Life at 40 feels different because you are different. Your brain is sharper. Your intuition is louder. Your boundaries are firmer. Your soul is wiser. You no longer tolerate emotional chaos because you've spent too many years untangling yourself from it. You no longer seek validation because you've learned how fragile and temporary it is. You no longer confuse attention with affection or intensity with intimacy. You see through people now, not with judgment, but with clarity. You recognize emotional immaturity instantly because you've outgrown your own. You can sense when someone's words don't match their energy. You can feel the difference between someone who is present and someone who is performing. You can tell when someone wants your company and when they want your compliance. And so, your circle gets smaller, but your peace grows larger. Life at 40 becomes less about having many people around you and more about having the right people within reach of your heart. You begin valuing presence over promises, consistency over charm, truth over comfort, loneliness over fake connection, because you finally realize a peaceful life is better than a crowded one. This is where life truly begins, in the quiet, honest, unfiltered relationship you build with yourself. There is something sacred about reaching 40. Not sacred in the way society imagines it, but sacred in the way the soul understands it. Because this is the age where you begin reclaiming yourself, piece by piece, layer by layer, truth by truth, not with urgency, not with fear, but with a kind of calm determination that only comes after years of breaking, rebuilding, and breaking again. Around 40, you begin to see your life from a higher vantage point. You notice the patterns, the cycles, the repeated lessons, the subtle ways life has tried to wake you up. And finally, you awaken. Not suddenly, but steadily, like a sunrise that takes its time stretching across the sky. You start understanding that nothing you went through was random. Not the heartbreaks, not the disappointments, not the wrong turns or the people who failed to love you. Everything shaped your awareness. Everything sharpened your intuition. Everything prepared your spirit. Life begins at 40 because you no longer see your past as a burden. You see it as preparation. The betrayals taught you boundaries. The heartbreaks taught you self-respect. The losses taught you gratitude. The struggles taught you resilience. The silence taught you how to hear your own voice. Slowly, you start embracing your own authority. The authority to define your life, your values, your relationships, your emotional reality. This is the era of inner sovereignty. You stop waiting for permission. You stop seeking approval. You stop making yourself small to fit into places that were never meant for your spirit. You begin moving differently, not to impress anyone, but to protect the peace you finally built. Your yes becomes intentional. Your no becomes powerful. Your boundaries become non-negotiable. And most importantly, your relationship with yourself becomes deeper, fuller, more anchored. You no longer avoid the dark corners of your inner world. You explore them. You illuminate them. You listen to what they've been wanting to tell you. You uncover truths you once buried, desires you once denied, parts of yourself you once exiled. This is reintegration. This is healing. This is becoming whole. At 40, you begin to value the things your younger self overlooked. Stillness, authenticity, routines that nourish your nervous system, friendships that feel like safety, work that aligns with purpose, love that honors your soul, not your wounds. You notice your energy shifting. You become more sensitive to environments that drain you, more selective about who has access to your inner world, more intentional about where your time goes. Because time feels different now, more precious, more finite, more sacred. You no longer want to waste it on temporary people or temporary versions of yourself. Instead, you want depth. You want alignment. You want meaning. This is where life truly begins, in the quiet, deliberate pursuit of what feels real. And around 40, realness becomes the only thing you're willing to invest in. People say life begins at 40, but awakened souls know the truth. At 40 you begin. Life begins at 40. Not because you become someone new, but because you finally return to who you've always been. You stop lying to yourself. You stop abandoning your needs. You stop entertaining versions of life that insult your spirit. At 40, clarity replaces chaos. Presence replaces performance. Self-respect replaces self-doubt. And wisdom replaces the noise that once controlled you. You begin to understand that every experience before 40 was shaping the inner architecture of your soul, preparing you for a life built on consciousness, not conditioning, on truth, not expectation, on alignment, not approval. Now, you stand in the doorway of your second life. A life where you choose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of self-knowledge. A life where you honor your limits, not out of fear, but out of sacred responsibility. A life where you give your energy, not to impress the world, but to protect your peace. And the most powerful realization emerges. You are no longer becoming, you are. This is your era of inner sovereignty, your era of truth, your era of conscious creation. Life before 40 was the rehearsal. Life after 40 is the masterpiece. And if you feel this awakening rising within you, if you feel your soul whispering that you are meant for more, trust it, honor it, follow it. Because this time, you're not living by the expectations of the world. You're living by the wisdom of your own spirit. If this message spoke to you, subscribe for more deep, reflective, Jung-inspired storytelling on healing, self-mastery, emotional clarity, and soul-level awakening. Your journey is only beginning.